All right, we are live right here. There's nobody on listening yet. That's okay. You're listening to Smooth Jazz 107.6 Cages. KJIZ 107.6. Spraying hot music all over your face. So apparently I have something coming over my speakers and I got to find it. Oh, there it is. Got to turn that crap off. There you go. Now I can not listen to myself come back at myself, as fun as that is. So I thought I'd just have some fun with this and just talk about Star Wars. Now, last week, there was the Star Wars celebration, which was, I spoke about it, how I'm getting tired of seeing token political statements being shoved in our faces. I can't even enjoy something without having to deal with, hey, strong females, minorities, blah, 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 blah. I got nothing against the people that are being put into uh, these movies. I don't care. I just don't understand. So fine, that's what they want to do. That's fine. I don't care. But I just wanted to get off all the political stuff and just talk about Star Wars in general. And I, I see all the kids, I see all the young guys, and they're crying over it and going nuts, and that's great. If you grew up with it, you grew up with it on VHS or that sort of thing. But if you're my age, if you're a Gen Xer in his mid 40s or later, um, you were there when it all began. And I don't think people quite understand in this day and age what it was like back then to have something like Star Wars come in and basically rewrite your brain chemistry, which is exactly what it did. It totally destroyed me. Never saw anything like it. Now, I saw it at 6 or 7 years old. Um, and up until that time, I'd probably seen things like, Bambi, Wizard of Oz, Walt Disney movies in the theater, maybe a Witch Mountain. I don't know. Nothing too spectacular. And certainly I wasn't old enough, or maybe I was way too young because I couldn't go to the theater to see 2001. And in those days, you had the three stations. We had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and a PBS channel, and then we had one UHF channel. And when they showed movies, it was either the ABC movie of the week, where you hoped you got to see something from back in the day, so you might see a Jaws or something like that, or um, you never saw a Disney movie unless the Wide World of Disney was playing it. 6 o'clock on NBC or ABC, and it was an hour-long show, so they'd play the first half, and then next weekend you would get to watch the second half. There's no VCRs, or the people that had them. I mean, they were way too expensive, so you just didn't get to see it. You saw a movie in the theater, and that was it. So if a movie did well, it had legs. And when I say legs, it could last 6, 8, maybe a year in the theater, 6, 8 months, maybe a year. But even up until that time, the movie in the 1970s, the movies back then were really going through a real gritty time. So even if you're going to watch sci-fi, you're going to watch something like Silent Runnings or THX 1138 or Zardoz or A Boy and His Dog, or other, the original Mad Max. If you could even get it at that time, and I think even that was after the fact. But some of the earlier stuff, Logan's Run, and they weren't bad movies, but they weren't fun. And they certainly, at 6 or 7 years old, I had very little interest in them because I didn't know what the hell I was watching here. So there was no big special effects extravaganzas. There was nothing like that. There's no VCR tapes. You read books. You watched whatever they showed you on your 4 or 5 channels, And this was still the days when they went off the air. They actually at 2 o'clock in the morning or so, or maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, they'd play the national anthem, and then they went off the air. So you in the days of the internet now, you've got so many things to watch, to look at, and everything. Didn't have anything like that. Technology wasn't there, and the movies just weren't there. It was very grim and gritty. Gone through Watergate and everything. We had the what's it the one with Easy Rider, and various other Bonnie and Clyde. It was just Godfathers, great movies, but not exactly anything that people just were cheering about, were enjoying. They weren't fun movies. They were important movies, but they weren't fun. And then Star Wars comes, and you see something in special effects at a time and a place, a perfect story, a perfect set of special effects, basically a perfect movie in a perfect time that it couldn't have come out at any other time, uh, and just totally destroyed the nation. It wasn't just us kids. Uh, George Lucas came on to the last one. He says, the last Star Wars movie was for kids. I said, well, yeah, I guess it was, but it's not exactly. I mean, adults, children, everybody loved it. I mean, it went to the Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture. It was in the movie. It was in the theaters for at least a year. And you're talking that blockbusters back then maybe made $20 million. It was a high grossing movie back then. It was 20, 30 million. Jaws blew up the box office. But before that, I mean, $100 million movies, they just didn't happen. They just didn't happen with any regularity. And Star Wars comes in and it makes 275 million during its first run, which is a number that is so fucking phenomenal, so insane. And it was everywhere. I mean, I remember watching things like the old Donnie Marie show and having dancing stormtroopers. You think it was everywhere now. It's everywhere now if you want to see it. You can choose to watch. You could dive yourself into Netflix. You can go to Audible. You can watch YouTube. You could go a million different places and never see a fucking thing about Star Wars if you really want to. I mean, God's honest truth. When you have the radio and 4 stations on the TV, because I don't count PBS, it didn't show anything really that enjoyable. Sesame Street or some things for the kids, but that was about it. That's all you had. And on any one of those stations, somebody was trying to cash in on Star Wars. The Muppets. I mean, it was everywhere. It was on T-shirts, the toy aisles, everything else. It just, the entire nation, that's all they were talking about. And that's the biggest difference between the culture now and the culture then, is that when something came out, everybody was talking about it. That's why movies still hold kind of an importance, I think, in our culture now. It's because it's the one thing that kind of everybody will talk about and everybody knows about. TV shows, the ratings that TV shows used to get then that would get them canceled would be smash hits now. I mean, you had 50, 60, 70% of the country watching some of these. The only thing that enjoys that kind of thing right now is a Super Bowl or NFL football. Not even the Olympics or any of that anymore. Nobody watches, and because you don't have to. You can go watch something else. You could go find something else, but you just didn't have the choice back then. And so when something came out like Star Wars, which not only was the only thing that was really great that everybody watched because there wasn't that much out there, but it was also just a perfectly told story with special effects that you had never seen before, and perfectly cast, and the music, John Williams music, and George Lucas calls it the secret sauce of Star Wars. And so as kids, it's all we talked about. For 3 years, it was all we talked about. And it was the gateway for me to a set of movies that and not just a set of movies, not just the Star Wars movies, but just a time of creativity and the creation of intellectual properties. I can go down the list. You say Superman. Well, Superman wasn't really created, but he sure came into his own with that first Christopher Reeve movie, and started. At least he's the granddaddy of comic book movies right now. Um, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jaws, which became a franchise, um, Alien, 1979, Empire Strikes Back, of course, in 1980, Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, and then 82. Star Trek had Wrath of Khan and really came into its own. Yes, but it got created in the 60s. It was kind of the first of the geek properties to get created. But it all really started with Star Wars. It really kicked it off. And all these other properties started coming up after that we all remember. The Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Thing, which was an amazing thing, the Blade Runner, Tron, Back to the Future, Roger Rabbit. Just so much came out at that time, and that worked its way up, of course, with the movies starting to make some really big money and just growing in leaps and bounds through the 80s, and the special effects just getting better and better. That continued on through the end of the 80s, Ghostbusters, and then Ghostbusters 2, and then finally you had the Lethal Weapon series and all these great action genres, the Beverly Hills Cops. It just was one new creative franchise after another getting created that was just taking the entire country by storm, and everybody knew about these things. And what's sad to me now, I feel like Jurassic Park was the last of it. Like after Jurassic Park, there was very little original that came out. It was either it was a little bit of a wasteland in the 90s, and there were some good movies, but there weren't these new intellectual properties coming out. And there wasn't all this new stuff. It was either trying to find something that was already out there and remake it, or well, that's all it's been. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse as time has gone on. And to a certain extent, that is also the fall of Star Wars. Now you have this valuable property, and you're going to try to milk it for all it's worth. And in order to create these amazing images, they're so expensive, you're not going to take a lot of chances like you did back then. And you had just some weird shit come out. I mean, killer clowns from outer space. You talk about it's weird, it's fucked up, but at least it was original. At least it was something you hadn't seen before, as stupid as it was. And there's probably tons of that kind of stuff. And I watch Star Wars, and I know it's special because it's something that still sticks with me after all these years. And I'm sure people could say, well, there's problems with the movies, and I don't like this and all that. And I've had people that I see this on the talkbacks. Movies become some sort of weird religion. All you Gen Xer geeks, you just can't accept that the new Force Awakens is not very good. Well, fuck you. Yes, it is. It's fine. Is it as good as what we saw? No, because it's a rehash. But it had good characters, and it was fun, and I enjoy it, and I go back and rewatch it. And if it has some rewatchability, then it's a fine movie. They've done a real good job with the MCU and the Marvel stuff, but I think we just keep reaching to have that moment where we discover something that just takes the nation by storm. And it's not happening anymore because nobody's able to make anything original anymore. And that's a sad, because we picked up the novelizations and the stupid action figures. I still have a bunch of the cards, the trading card stuff. And I just loved it. I just loved all the stuff that came along with it, except for the Christmas special. That was terrible. But somehow even the terrible stuff has its own charm. And now it's clearly just all corporatist, and it's all, I mean, I go watch them and I enjoy them. And I think there is something that, I don't believe that the company is trying to make crap, but there is this bottom line corporate milking a property, mining a property to get all the gold you can out of it. There is a little bit of that undercurrent that seems to be going on. The veneer and everything they put on it, you don't feel like you're watching art anymore. You don't feel like you're watching something that's going to touch you anymore. And Star Wars did. I can when VCRs first came out in the early '80s, and Star Wars was finally broadcast on television. I think it was like 1985. Finally got broadcast on television, and I didn't have a VCR yet, but my aunt did in Chicago, and they had recorded Star Wars on it. And so we go up there for, I don't remember, just visit, whatever it was. Stay up there for a week, and I probably wore out that tape watching it over and over and over. And I'm sure they were all looking at me. It's like, he's watched it like 16 times. Why is he going to watch it again? It just was that kind of movie. You just had to watch it over and over and over again. I could still watch it. I mean, I don't watch it over and over and over again like I did when I was a kid, but I can still pop it in and enjoy it, even though I know every goddamn line, I know every moment, every scene, everything. For some reason, I can still pop it in and watch it. And I haven't seen a movie come out in a long time that has that kind of staying power with me. So is that nostalgia? I don't think so. I mean, I don't find myself going to a lot of the old movies from back in the day, a few. But how much of it is nostalgia and how much is it we just had better movies back then? I mean, I feel bad for the kids today. Those John Hughes movies back then have a lot of staying power. I don't see any teenage coming of age movies that are coming out right now that are really that good, that are going to be memorable. And maybe it's because I'm not that age anymore. Maybe I just can't see them for what they are. But I don't. I mean, my daughter, she doesn't really rave about it. She'd rather go watch some of the older stuff. Nothing's really resonating with her, and she's really into movies too. So, and she's 15. So I'm kind of looking at, how are the kids reacting to this stuff? And to them, it's become disposable. It wasn't disposable to us at that time. Getting these stories, reading the insane 70s version of the comics, all that kind of crap. It just was so much fun. And you felt like you were, in hindsight, you felt like you were discovering something or becoming part of something new that was going to last. Like there really was a world that was created. I mean, when I watch Star Wars, I watch other movies and it's just something I watch, but Star Wars has always been a place that I go. It's actually a place that I go. It's like, I feel like I'm visiting that damn world, as weird as that may be. And I'm sure, some books I felt that way, at least some of the older ones. But I don't see that happening now. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way or what's going on. So and again, this stream is mostly for me. Just wanted to yammer about it, have some fun, and just kind of reminisce about the things that I remember from Star Wars and what I liked about Star Wars. I think the first movie, if we want to go through the prequels, the less said about them, the better. And well, you know what? I am going to talk about something. I am going to talk about the prequels a little bit. Pissed about them now. I was very pissed about them back 10 years ago. After they were all said and done. And the Red Letter Media, if you've not watched Red Letter Media, by the way, the Mr. Plinkett reviews, I highly recommend that you go do that. They are amazing. But, excuse me, the movies were terrible. There was, I think, something there as far as George Lucas creating some interesting concepts. Building a war, fooling the Jedi kind of coming off the path that they should be on. I think in broad strokes, there's some interesting concepts that he put together there. But the details were in the writing was just terrible. And there was so many things that contradicted other things. It didn't make sense. And they're sterile, and he went too far with the clean special effects and everything on a blue screen, and that all made it didn't look like Star Wars. But when they were all said and done, and you thought, well, that's it. That's all the Star Wars we're going to get ever again. Uh, they pissed me off. It literally pissed me off, and I just kind of went to well, they don't exist anymore. Now that we're getting new Star Wars and reasonably enjoyable Star Wars, I think it's still missing something, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Rogue One is like 1/3 of a good movie. That third act is amazing, but it's a good third act, but it's also based on a whole bunch of nostalgia. I mean, when I can see Gold Leader and Red Leader, who were pulled off the some old footage from back in the day, cleaned up and stuck in there. Yeah, of course, that's amazing. That's a lot of fun when you see Yabba and all this stuff. But it's standing on the shoulders of a movie that's coming after it, which is amazing. But the actual movie just didn't. It's not engaging enough, and it doesn't hold up emotionally once you get past that first or second screening. The original Star Wars does. Star Wars has held up for me emotionally for 40 fucking years. I mean, that's insanity. And the whole trilogy does. I can't believe that's all nostalgia, because there's plenty of shit that I watched back in the day that don't hold up at all. I mean, I adored the old Transformers and Voltron cartoons. God, they're no good at all. They are awful. And I'm pleased that they redid. Those are some things that were screaming to be redone, and in Transformers' case, it's still screaming to be redone thanks to Michael Bay. But the original Star Wars holds up, and I don't. It's just beat for beat, it just works perfectly. And you can put all the John Williams one on the new stuff. There's something missing, and I can't figure out what it is. So you see the first one. You're 7 years old, and the first thing you see is the music sting and Star Wars on the screen. I mean, it just reaches. You don't know what you're getting. Remember, you have no idea what you're getting. You don't know anything about the movie. I'm in the Glenwood Theater in Overland Park, Kansas. And at that time, it was the largest indoor theater in the Kansas City area. And at least the largest indoor screen. And it would regularly show 70 millimeters films when they could get them. Things like Earthquake or, some of those disaster epics. I think Poseidon Adventure and stuff like that did some 70 millimeter stuff. So you'd watch this kind of thing and you go, your 7-year-old brain just can't. I mean, it's broke. It's split in fucking half. The music comes out and it just punches you dead in the face. Bah! And on it goes. And then the opening scroll comes up. And just you're like, this just looks epic. This must be huge. The thing is flying off into the distance, and you're like, what have I just stumbled on here? What is this amazing thing I'm about to see? I mean, come on, it's got to be a thing on a string or something. You're always kind of disappointed. You always feel like, like when I got the toys for Star Wars, like I want to get a land speeder that floats, and it's just a couple of things on little wheels and springs. It's just a little hidden. It doesn't float at all. It's like, oh, that's not it. So you figure it's not going to be that good. And then the first ship comes overhead. Bam, 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 bam. And you're like, and it's so bright. The engines, I'd never seen engines like that before. They're bright, white, blue engines, just glowing. They're not fire, they're not flames. They're these weird, just white lights. I'd never seen anything like that before. And then the Star Destroyer comes over. I'm 7 years old. This is the biggest screen in Kansas City. And I'm looking up at this thing. And I felt like it was going to swallow my ass up. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And then those 3 big blue-white engines on the back. and I'm mesmerized. And I'm pretty sure I didn't move, maybe blink for the rest of the fucking movie. And I'm just flabbergasted. It's my 7-year-old brain. It's like going, I can't understand what I'm seeing. I'm absolutely 100% in love. And I those of you who know the movie, I'm just going through it, and I'm listening to more and more. The droids come out, and here's this trash can. It's beeping and booping, and oh, wow, robots don't look like that. They always look like Robbie the robot, and they were very weird. They didn't have emotions, and they yes, does not compute and talked always monotone, does things like that. And here's a very fussy British golden robot and this trash can that's just beeping and booping, and he can understand the beeping and booping. And that concept, I was like, whoa, it's freaking me out. And they then they go down to this dirty, dusty sand planet. Now, up until then, all the sci-fi movies, everybody was nice and clean cut. Everything was clean. Everything looked brand new. No, not this. This goes down. Everything looks dirty and messed up. And then here comes these things with the glowing eyes, these Jawas. You're like, what are they gonna do? They got, and you think alien creatures. Oh my gosh, they're just junk dealers. That's all they are. Just junk dealers. They're just having, just making a living. And the biggest goddamn pickup truck I've ever seen in my life. And finally, you've built this whole world up. You've seen Darth Vader. He comes through. The door opens. Let's go back to the ship, right? So the droids are off the ship. When the guys are all standing there, you can see their faces, and they're all got their guns pointed at the opening of the ship. And you're saying, okay, what's going to come through here? And the door flashes open, and a bunch of fucking skeletons come out. The stormtroopers, they're all exactly the same, and they all kind of resemble skulls and skeletons. They're Death coming out, and right behind him is Death himself, fucking Black Darth Vader. I mean, the imagery is just so fantastic. And you've got real faces of the rebels, human faces. You see them die. You see their expressions. You see them in pain. You see them scared. You see different faces. You see individuals, right? Not the Empire. The Empire comes through. It's just a bunch of fucking skeletons and Death himself. And that's the first. Nothing has been spoken yet, and that's the first images you get. You get the small ship, which is the rebels, and this big long ship, dominant camera angle, goes on and on forever, long reach of the Empire, and then the skeletons come out the goddamn door, along with Death. It's so fucking brilliant. And people forget it. People are so used to it. But it was such a brilliant way to get you grabbed in and pulled into this world, and to give you, without one single word, the imagery you needed to understand exactly what the fuck was going on. Contrast that to the Phantom Menace, where you have some ship pull into another ship, and they say some boring stuff, and then they go in and have coffee. I was like, what is happening? You have no idea what the fuck is going on, or why it's going on, or anything. Other than your prior knowledge of Star Wars. That's all you've got to go on. So you meet your protagonist, you meet Luke. He's clearly a kid who wants to go on an adventure. I mean, it's classic. You know exactly where he's coming from. He's in there playing with his little toy and doing as every boy my age, if you had a plane or a spaceship toy, you would whiz it around, dreaming of doing something else. You got everything I need. I just saw him do that, got everything I need. But he's got a overbearing dad, his aunt and uncle tell him to do chores, get your head out of the clouds, blah, 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 blah. Everything that we understood back then. Everything. And then He loses, gets pushed on an adventure. The call to adventure comes. He goes and chases R2 into the desert. He gets to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan says, you need to come with me to Alderaan. Um, we got to go. We got to go stop your father. I mean, Darth Vader. What did I say? No, he killed your father. I'm not a big fat liar. He goes and calls Luke, says, come with me. I need your help. We got to go to Alderaan. He refuses the call to adventure, just like, something right out of, I think they've said it's a hero with 1,000 faces and all that. But it's basically hitting all the mythological high points just perfectly. He goes and tries to help him as best as he can. You feel for the guy, you feel for Luke, you feel like he's a good kid. He wants to do the right thing, but he needs, it's got family, he's got things holding him back. He's trying to be responsible, even though he dreams of going on this adventure. You gotta love that. Just refusing the call for something he believes is bigger than himself, which is his family. He's wrong at that time, but he believes it. Then he goes and he finds his family's been murdered, and so he decides to go on the call for adventure. So this first step out into this new world, out into this world that he realizes is very dangerous. As every adventure goes on, he steps into the cantina, which is just filled with just alien life forms, right? Perfect simile. He's entering an alien world. He's entering a world that is completely unfamiliar to him. And this is the first gateway into this new hell that he's going to go into to try to get out the other side. And what I loved about the cantina was in every 50s movie, you had these weird aliens with the big white heads and the black eyes and like maybe fish gills or something on them, and they were always coming in with their flying saucers and wrecking the place and trying to take over, and they were the scariest fucking things you could see in the 50s. You get to Star Wars, they're the band. they're just the band. And in my opinion, it would explain a lot of those 50s movies, because you've seen bands fuck up hotel rooms, right? They're tossing dinette sets off the balcony and stuff like that. They just got off a gig. They're really drunk. They're pissed off. They're fucking things up. And they took out the Washington Monument. Come on, cut them a break, They're just a little high. They weren't trying to take over the world in the 50s. They're just the band. I was always amused by that. So they go and they find the help. They find Han Solo, who in my mind he will always be my favorite fictional character ever. Just the guy who is chaotic good, if you want to go with Dungeons and Dragons. By the way, another intellectual property developed in that time. But he's a guy who doesn't like authority, wants to do things on his own, does what has to be done, but is always trying to do the right thing. And I mean, to me, that's just the way to be. I loved everything he did, because it was always, fuck you, I'll do whatever I want. Now, I understand his flaws, and he's not probably the best guy to be a father. And I thought that was kind of brilliant in making his son and Leia's son a complete fuck up that would turn over to the dark side, because I just think he'd be a terrible father. A guy like that would. But for me, as just the guy you want to be, a young Harrison Ford perfectly embodying that character, he was the best. And he had the kick-ass ship, and he had a awesome hairy dog first mate, and the holographic chess set, and it was amazing. And he, of course, that archetype just resonated like no one else did. Nobody had the career that Harrison Ford did, and he just owned that fucking character. It was amazing. This is and because of that character, because of the way he was, and because of what he did, and how he came to know things bigger than himself as time went on through the trilogies, he grew as a character. It's why the Han shot first was so fucking insulting, because he was a mercenary. He was a guy who lived in this world that Luke just walked into, this hellscape called the Cantina. But to him, it's a hellscape of death and danger at every turn. Is Solo's home. For all intents and purposes, this is where he lives in terms of the thematic structure of the story. So here's a guy this is where he lives. And of course, in a world like that, you're going to be murdering people before they murder you. So to sanitize it like that was an insult to our intelligence. And that's why people are so pissed about the Han shot first thing. Because nobody really gives a damn about, in fact, people kind of enjoyed the upgrades in the special edition with the X-wing and the ending the ending space battle. It needed a few, and it looked great. And I had no problems with making it Dolby 6.1, 7.1, whatever they did, remixing all the sound and cleaning up the special effects blemishes and mats and things like that around the models. I don't think anybody had a problem with that. but the Han shot first was such a middle finger to us, and rationally we never could figure out why. Why did he do this? Why? What was the purpose? And it's what begat later on E.T., where all the FBI guys were shooting Elliot and the kids with walkie-talkies because he digitally replaced all the guns. It's like, what? And even Spielberg, to his credit, said that was a fucking mistake. We're sorry about that. But Lucas has held on to his guns on that one. And I'm not sure why. It doesn't make any sense to me. It makes no sense why he's been doing that. I apologize. I'm going to take a quick break here. Elephant in the Room and Jackson Scales, hola, both of you. I would agree. I don't think there's been a memorable coming of age movie in the last decade. And I'm feeling quite nostalgic too. So I just kind of throwing this out here. Just wanted to talk about something that's near and dear to me. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to go get myself a drink and keep my voice a little lubricated up, because I can feel it already starting to fall apart, and it's not a great voice to begin with, so I need to do everything I can. So hold on. Okay. Big gulp. Oh, yes. So, where were we? So we get to the cantina. They purchase the ship, the passage aboard the Millennium Falcon, and they head towards their destination of Alderaan to try to get the plans to Princess Leia. Meanwhile, Princess Leia was captured at the beginning of the film. She's witness to watching her home planet get destroyed. So now you've seen the Empire do something that's just fucking unforgivable. So anything that the good guys do is probably pretty justified. And yet they don't do anything that's really off. There's no gray here. And I think I think sometimes as a kid you kind of relate to that. I mean, sometimes, yeah. I mean, I like a deep story. I like, sometimes that things aren't always that simple, but sometimes they fucking are. Sometimes it is that simple. It is that easy to make the decision, and I don't think we have enough of those stories, or they're relegated to being too simple. They have to be kids' stories. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we can have stories that aren't so gray all the time. We can have a good old fashioned black and white movie, and it's fine. Um, I think the MCU did that to a certain extent. I think they've earned the right to go a little darker and weirder now and be a little bit more gray. Things like Civil War and that kind of stuff. But the original Captain America is just, hey, I'm going to punch Nazis and take care of bullies, and that's all you need to know. It was fine. It was a lot of fun. Um, the only problem with the first Captain America movie is that after they got done with the origin, they forgot that they had another 45 minutes worth of movies, so they had to figure out what to do. He got punches the Red Skull and he crashes the plane. Hey, he's in 2012. Yay! So anyway, they get dragged into hell, into the Death Star. Death Star captures them, and they get dragged in, and they have to find their way out of hell. They're deep within the underworld of hell, surrounded by skeletons. Death is all around them. That's what the Death Star is. I mean, it's right there in the name, right? So they sneak around, and then just trying to get out. That's all they really want to do. But they take the time to go ahead and rescue the princess, and that was enjoyable, and that was something a little different. Women certainly were to be rescued back then, and indeed that's what they did. They did rescue her, but she was also the leader of the rebellion, or a leader anyway, and she was in the Senate. She was a senator. She was an accomplished person, and when they finally go get her, she has to say, Jesus, give me the fucking gun. Bloom, get in the garbage chute. Somebody's got to fix this because you two yahoos didn't remember to actually make an escape plan once you came and got me, you dumb fucks. And that nobody'd seen that before. And when it's done within the confines of the story and you feel like you're doing something original and you're not doing it for some sort of weird political reasons, it's amazing and it works. And there's not enough of that. Now they do it only for political reasons. And that's what bothered me about the Star Wars Celebration when I talked about how they put all this stupid. We're going to do a thing on strong female characters. We have to talk about the females and blah, 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 blah. It just feels like a pale imitation. And what was the point of that? I didn't want to hear it. I don't care. You did something original and memorable that still works to this day, and it wasn't thought of trying to create some political movement. It was trying to do something within the confines of the story to be entertaining and to make sense, and so on and so forth. And it succeeded so well. You had a group. One thing George Lucas did is that when he cast the Star Wars, the main three, he did it in terms of how well their chemistry would work. And you want to talk about work. I mean, now you build something around a guy, right? And I don't think there's nearly enough time taken in, one, stories and scripts, and two, in making sure that you're casting with chemistry. I think everybody, the one thing the last Amazing Spider-Man did well, the one with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, was that those two had incredible chemistry. And everybody noticed the chemistry. And the reason why everybody noticed the chemistry is because there's so little of it these days. Or it's passable at best. When George Lucas cast the original Star Wars, he went through, I don't know how many dozens of each of the characters to try to figure out who is going to be best for Han Solo Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, and then put together all these different combinations of these people, trying to figure out which three had the best chemistry. And he actually narrowed it down to two groups of three, the ones we got, and another group that I don't even know who they were. And he still had to choose, and he said it took him like six months to do it. That's a lot of time to try to cast a movie. But it paid off. I mean, the effort was put in. One of the things that people notice on the new Star Wars, or I say the prequels that he directed, was a lot of him sitting in a chair drinking his coffee and not really putting in the kind of effort that was needed. And he went through a lot of shit on that original Star Wars, a lot of shit. Tunisia, destroyed. They had rain for the first time, and it's a fucking desert. You can imagine how long it takes before they get rain. Of course, it rained like a son of a bitch. Nothing worked. The robots were always falling over, not working, breaking. And he was getting constant pressures from the studio. Constant pressures. There was only one guy at 20th Century Fox that really believed in him, was Alan Ladd Jr. And Alan Ladd was like, this is going to be the greatest movie you've ever seen. And nobody would believe him. And it went over budget. It was budgeted at $10 million. Can you imagine a special effects extravaganza like Star Wars for $10 million? Well, it went over. It went to 12 million or 12.5. And he finally, at one point, had to be taken to the hospital because he was getting so much pressure from the studio. And it wasn't just 20th Century Fox. They were filming over in, I don't think it was Pinewood that time, but it was in England, at least on the stuff that wasn't on location, like Tatooine. And everybody in the shooting crew in England, they all got off at noon, or they got off at 5 o'clock, whether they liked it or whether, unless he was in the middle of a shot, he couldn't ask him to work over. And he's up against it. They're trying to get these shots and they're running out of time. And none of these British guys will work longer than what their union says they'll work. And they're bad-mouthing him behind his back, or probably to his face too. This is ridiculous. There's a hairy dog running around. There's this golden, weird-looking robot. They just were shitting on him constantly. And the cast is trying to break him up and be funny, and they don't really realize that it's just making things worse for poor George. And George ended up having he thought it was a heart attack at one point, and then it turned out it was it was stress. I don't know what the specific symptoms were, but he did have to be hospitalized to this because he thought he gambled everything. It wasn't gonna get made. He didn't know if it was gonna get made. And finally, he gets it in the can, and they show it to the studio executives. First, he shows it to all his friends, and we're talking guys like Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, so on and so forth. And they all look at it, they go, "George, what have you done?" And these are his peers, the guys now, it wasn't quite finished. I think the music wasn't there, and some of the sound effects were not there, and there was some other stuff, but they were all looking at him like, "George, what the fuck have you done? What have you done? This is terrible. I think Spielberg liked it. Everybody else is, you're in trouble, buddy." So that didn't help. But then he shows it to the studio execs, and he got a standing ovation from all the studio execs. The first time they finally got to see this piece of garbage that was going to bankrupt them, and they all just flipped out. But even then, he couldn't get the goddamn thing in theaters. It opened up in 40 to 60 theaters around the country on May 25th, 1977. And there was another movie that had come out that was based on some best-selling book. And I don't remember what it is. Nobody remembers what it is. And it's a lot of the theaters, they pressured to take Star Wars if they wanted this other movie, which was based on this book that was supposed to be like a big deal. And so the only reason a lot of these theaters would take it was because of this book. And then they have what nobody really did anymore was a big premiere over at Grom's Chinese Theater. Grom, whatever it is. And it's wrapped around the block. For days and weeks, it's wrapped around the block. The word of mouth back then, in the absence of the internet, you had newspaper reviews, which were generally pretty good, but not as favorable as you might think back in the day. A lot of the stuff on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff has been revised later on. And if you think that's funny, Empire, they really shit on, which is still considered the best of all of them, and maybe one of the greatest movies ever made. So, yeah, I know it's going to be a hit. I know it's going to be a hit. Finally, it's a hit. And boy, is it a fucking hit. And Fox ends up just making out like gangbusters. He, however, was smart enough to say, I'm only gonna take, like, he reduced his salary and he wanted a cut of the net or the gross, and figuring it wasn't gonna make that much. But he also made sure that he got the right, if it was a success, to make the sequels. He says, I want to make the sequels, and that's in the contract. If this is a success, I reserve the right to make the sequels. Well, fuck, it was a huge success. And he owned pretty much all the rights to this thing. This thing that turned out to be the biggest gold rush in movie history. And early on, they couldn't sell it or market it for shit. And they finally get this one toy company named Kenner, who I think is still around, and maybe they're owned by Hasbro now, to say, okay, we'll make a few figures for it. We don't have much to lose. But nobody figures it's going to be a hit. So Kenner is completely caught off guard and has no idea how they're going to get these figures ready and going in the numbers that was wanted at that time by Christmas of 77, because it comes out in May. It just ramps up, and by the time you get to July or something, it's getting late. You can't just design and mold these, especially not in 77, just design and mold action figures and get them out there by Christmas. You couldn't do it. So they sent out, and I had some friends, I think I even had one of these. I know I had some friends that did. They were opening up on Christmas Day this piece of cardboard that said, "Here's a picture of all the action figures, and this is a certificate or a voucher to get yours when they come out in March." So he opened up a picture of your action figures of Star Wars, and you were happy to get it. You were happier than pigs and shit to get that. So anyway, moving on back to the movie. They escape from the Death Star, and they get the princess. You see Ben sacrifice himself, which, again, you gotta keep cutting away Luke's support systems. You first cut away his family. Now you cut away his mentor. And you keep upping the scales for him to get him out there to be the hero by the end, right? And so he's with Han and Leia and Chewbacca, the Millennium Falcon, and you have that amazing scene where the 4 TIE fighters come after him, and that is cut in such a way I think is the most brilliantly cut action scene in cinema, especially up to that time. And I'm sure people could say, no, what about X, Y, Z? Fine, whatever. This was the first time it happened. And what he did was he kept telling the guys what he wanted, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't understand it because nobody had done anything this fast before. And go back to a movie from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and look at how slowly it's cut, how none of the editing is cut in a way that pushes the action along. It's always the story and the action dictating the edits. And so it becomes very soap opera blocking. This guy talks, so you put the camera on him. And then this guy talks, and you put the camera on him. And sure, there was some some experimental movies, usually in European markets or something like that. But for the most part, mainstream stuff, it was very, very soap opera. You had two shot and A camera, B camera, and that's all you did. And what was sick is that's what he went back to in the prequels. I mean, if you look at the prequels, everybody is sitting on a couch. You look at the one guy, you look at the other guy. It's just like a soap opera. There's the action scenes are crazy and amazing. You got Obi-Wan riding a giant lizard, fighting a robot, lizard inside a robot in a giant wheel with sparkly staffs smacking each other down a giant ramp and then falling off a cliff and then shooting. Great. But then when it was actual dialogue scenes, it was just two people walking down a hall, sitting on a couch, A camera, over the shoulder, B camera. There was nothing enjoyable about watching the prequels. They were so fucking boring. And so, but he used to understand this stuff because you could see it in the original Star Wars. He actually fired his original editor, who wanted to edit it in a more traditional way. He got some guys who ended up winning the Oscars for editing, their first editing job, or at least any big size job in theater, and they get Academy Awards for it. So good on them. And what he did was he finally took a bunch of in that scene where they're fleeing from the Death Star, they've got the TIE fighters coming at them. He took a bunch of scenes from World War II of people in B-52 bombers shooting at Zeros and German fighters and things like that, and cutting it so that it had the rhythm, and they could see people looking back and forth and everything, and that's how they cut that scene together. And it with the music and everything, I still find it one of the most amazing scenes ever. So they get away, they get over to Yavin, and begin their, get the plans, and now they're going to begin their final assault on hell itself, Death Star. And so you got those beautiful X-Wings, you've got this wonderful fight that they come up with, and once again, Luke is cut off from another lifeline. It's Han Solo this time. Han says, "Look, I'm my reward. I'm getting the fuck out of here." Luke is now in the ship alone. He was in the Millennium Falcon before, right? He was cut off from Ben, but he was still in the gunship, or in the gun turret. Han was on the other side, kind of helping him, guiding him. There's always this little bit of lifeline, little things that he held on to that he kept getting severed away as you went through the movie. And there's another one, and there's another one. And finally, now he's alone in the X-Wing. And they still kind of take it one step further. They're doing the dogfight, which is fun and memorable and everything else. Doing the dogfight, and then finally, the three Y-Wings they go through, they fail. And then it's time for the first three X-Wings turn. This is Red Leader. And Red Leader says, Luke, specifically singles out Luke. He says, I want you to take your half of the wing. You've proven yourself, and I want you to lead if I don't make it. And now Luke is not only on his own, he's responsible for these other three, or these other two guys. It's on him now. And then Red Leader dies, and that's the last lifeline. That's it. Luke is on his own. It's all up to him. And they've been building this over the course of the movie. I don't think people give that enough credit. I don't think people understand or realize how much credit George Lucas should get in hitting these points and these beats just perfectly. And so he goes down the trench, and just in case you're still not getting it, one last thing happens. R2-D2, who's been plugged into the back of the X-Wing, he gets blown away. He doesn't even have his best robot friend with him anymore. Just one more notch up there, just to up the tension and up the stakes just one more. It's flawless. That ending scene is flawless. And just when he thinks he's all alone, just when he thinks it's all on him, Han comes in and gets the guys off his back, which shows that as he's been moving through this story, he's had an effect on somebody. He's brought somebody back into the fold. It shows the growth of Han as a character. And so Luke is not alone. He's connected through the Force, through whatever you want to call it with. There's connections that he's making, but now he's the guy that's inspiring. He's the guy, he's no longer the guy following. He's the guy that's bringing these people back into the fight and getting them to be more than what they were just from his example. Even though he's lost all this along the way, it's all of that brought somebody back. So I don't know if people see the movie that way. I have. I think it's the kind of thing that is why it resonates so much, and why I think sometimes the first Star Wars doesn't quite get its due, because Empire is so fantastic. But it is a flawless ending, and so when you go, you get medals, and you get the giant ceremony and the beautiful music and everything else. It feels 100% fucking earned, and every single time it feels earned. And I never get tired of it, never. And we can compare that to The Force Awakens, which is, a lot of people say is the same movie, and it is, but there's some things that don't make sense, or things that happen that don't make sense, and the comparisons don't quite work. Rey doesn't earn nearly enough that Luke did. I think that's one of the big things. I'd have to go through it again because I don't know the movie quite as well, but I feel like Rey did not earn these moments the way Luke did, and so it doesn't. It's well done. I think what is earned and what does work. I think we're going to find out that this is going to be more of a Kylo Ren story than it is a Rey story, which I think was kind of the surprise when people look back at the original trilogy. It's more of a Vader story. It's the redemption of Darth Vader that is the hero's journey for Luke, although that's very, very important. So we'll see, but certainly at least the Force Awakens, the blowing up of Starkiller Base was not the focus that everything led up to. That's exactly what happened in the original, though. It was the Death Star was the focus. So we'll see where it goes from there. So what? Should I move on to Empire? Or should I how long have I been going now? Jesus. Oh, it's been an hour. That's not too long. What do you guys think? Or have you fallen asleep? Or are you face down your keyboard by now? I know there's a little bit of a delay, but we'll see if they say anything. Anyhow, still here. Stay here. Continue. Okay, so Empire, I was 9 years old. And I remember being somewhat, at that age, confused by the movie, just because it was bouncing back and forth so much, and I wasn't quite understanding why are they here? Oh, now they're in the city. What happened to Hoth? What's going on in the swamp? Wait, where are Han and just? I was having trouble keeping up with it that first time around, and I don't remember why. I just remember that was a thing, but I do remember quite clearly the Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," and then picking my jaw off the theater floor. And that was in the days before you could get spoiled. I mean, I'm sure I could have but I know it came out in the summer. I was with my grandfather. I wasn't in school, so nobody was talking about it yet. And I didn't know. So when I got to the theater, I was just completely fucking destroyed. And I don't know if it hit me. I don't know if it hit me on a personal level. I think it did, because my dad and I had a somewhat volatile relationship. He was an overbearing man in a lot of ways. Good man, took care of his family, but he was a drinker, and he could be. I've heard what some of these guys like Danny and stuff have gone through, and they say they've been abused, and I don't want to say that I was. I didn't get it because I didn't know why I wasn't getting it, for one. Like, I've heard of these poor kids who, just no fucking reason, dad just, smacks them around or something. It was usually because I knew I was supposed to do something, usually my schoolwork. I didn't do it, and I get smacked around. But there were times he could be his temper could get the better of him. And I never had any bruises or anything like that, but I was scared of my dad. I loved him, and we had good times, but I was also frightened of my dad. And so when this evil being in this world that I am so enamored with and so love turns out to be the hero's father, something definitely broke in my brain, or connected in my brain, however it happened. And it definitely touched me at a personal level. And I didn't know how to take it, because I didn't see my dad as an evil man. But I wasn't sure how to deal with it. It's because I'm 9, I mean, you don't deal with much of anything at 9. But it's something that just kind of sticks with you long term, right? So I'm 9, going on 10. It's 1980. But you start this movie. It starts out. All 3 movies start out with a Star Destroyer going overhead, which I like, but none of them really are the same as each other. And especially Empire, which is Irvin Kershner took over the directing reins for that. And he said he just saw it as the second act of a 3-act play, which is true enough. So he did the cool thing of putting the action at the beginning, which is the snowspeeder battle, and that is just phenomenal. You get to see. First you get to see Luke in a bad situation where he almost dies, but he has to go through. I guess it's kind of a mythological thing. The hero has to go into some sort of, what would you say, like a vision quest kind of thing. Like, he has to go off to some sort of sanctuary and some sort of to find some sort of information, to go find the scroll or something like that. In his case, he gets lost in the snow, and he ends up having a vision from Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, you need to go to Dagobah, get some real training, because right now you suck at this. I mean, you almost got eaten by a snow monster. So he gets rescued by Han, and then they have the Walker battle, which, yeah, how imaginative was that? I mean, I think that's what bothers me a little bit about the new Star Wars is there's too much nostalgia, there's too much cashing in on this, that, and the other thing. Hey, Bloodwing. So they do all this. They have the giant battle, and Luke gets to show that he's grown as a warrior. He's grown somewhat as a person. He's matured, and a lot of that has to do with, one, that he's leading the charge with the snow speeders, and you get to see him being clever. He's the one that comes up with the idea. Use the harpoon, go for the legs. It's like a far farm boy thinking of how to deal with animals when he was probably, protecting the farm. But it also shows that he's adaptable and can use creative thinking to work his way through situations. And then, even though it's overwhelming, and they do a very good job of showing how overwhelming the Empire is. In Star Wars, one of the bad things that everybody talks about is how the stormtroopers can't hit shit. In Empire, they hit quite a bit of shit. They were showing how much of a force, how much of an overwhelming force the Empire really was. That the Death Star was not the end all be all of the Empire. And one, they created that giant super star destroyer to kind of show, hey, they've got some more bullets in the gun. And then two, to come up with these giant ass lumbering tanks. Kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings when they did the Oliphants. But just these huge lumbering beasts, and you're just these little snow speeder mosquitoes trying to take these things out. So they're always shown from either you're in the snow speeder, but most of the time you're just looking up at them. They're always at a very high angle of dominance coming at you, and they just keep lumbering forward. They're just this inexorable drive towards you better get out, you better get out, you better get out. And it's again, the tension is just ramping up and ramping up. And that part was masterful. And so Luke ends up crashing his snowspeeder, and he ends up figuring out how to pull something out of the snowspeeder. It just misses getting tromped, and then shoots the thing up there, lights his lightsaber, opens it up, throws a bomb in there, and drops it. So you're saying, okay, he's willing to do what it takes. He's learning how to be a very effective warrior in the midst of all this. And then, but it's all for naught. The base is overrun, and in the middle of this, you have Han and Leia finding romance in tragedy and in dire situations, and it comes across very believable. It comes across as, if you got two people shoved together in such a high stress situation, you can see that sort of thing happening. And it's fucking Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher. I mean, I'd be smooching her too. Not so much in later years, but she probably would have snogged me. She had a habit of doing that to fans. Go find the couple of years ago celebration when a fan came up to try and take a selfie, and she was just going to give him a kiss on the cheek, and then she ended up just driving her tongue right down his throat. And to the host's chagrin, it was like, oh shit, I can't believe I'm a part of this. She was something. So they are on the run. The Falcon is broken. So there's always this tension of being found. They've broken the hyperdrive. It's the heart of the Falcon, and it's also kind of shows how the rebellion is broken. Nothing's working with the rebellion. Luke is having to go train because he's not a full Jedi. He needs to be, I don't want to call it repaired, but he needs to grow and get those skills because he's not there yet. It's like the Falcon's not there yet. You need to go find the parts. You got to do what it can so it can be the full Falcon again. And the team is not together like they should be. They're not fighting. They're all on the run. Everything is broken. Everything you see is a broken piece. And that's exemplified by 3PO getting blown up. He's broken. His arms and legs are off, right? R2 is always dirty and full of swamp mud or something, or trying to get eaten by somebody. Nothing is where it needs to be, and everybody is struggling just to get to a point where they're just safe, not defeating the Empire anymore, just safe, that they don't have a gun coming at them every 5 seconds. And so if it isn't the Empire, it's asteroids coming at you, or it's swamp monsters, or it's visions of Darth Vader in a cave, or just your own weaknesses and failures, not being able to be a part of the Force, not able to do the things that you're supposed to do that Yoda says you should do. And That's all. Just the tension just keeps pushing down on you and pushing down on you, and finally the killing blow is, oh, and by the way, I'm your father. And so it isn't just the moment, it's all everything leading up to the moment. And you go, holy shit, you've just been beat down and beat down through this whole movie. And then they got to give you one more. And I think that's why everybody loves the movie so much, because it just doesn't let up until the very end. And really well done. But even through it all, you learn things, you find some moments, you find love, you find enlightenment, you find new powers from learning. You may fail, but at least you found something, and that's that part of it I also like. So it's balanced out. And of course, everybody talks about the characters, Yoda. There's a moment, and this again is a red letter media. They notice this, but there's a moment that I think really kind of illustrates how the imagery is brilliant in Star Wars, and it came from the scene where in uh, the Millennium Falcon's just gone to the asteroid field, and they're hiding in what turns out to be a giant worm, and the guy comes into Vader's chamber. Now Vader is sitting in the middle of this weird circular chamber that cocoons him. It's not just some office seat. It's this weird chamber that he meditates in, or whatever's going on. And through this odd, because it's not a door, it's something from the top and the bottom, and it has these weird teeth. It almost looks like Vader's getting eaten by something. And so in order to see him, you kind of have to look around the teeth and everything. You get glimpses of him from the side until he turns it so that you could get him in full view. So you see a guy, the captain or Admiral Piet. He comes in, and he's more human in this situation. He's just a dude in a uniform. You can relate to him. And again, I'm talking about just in this one particular scene. As an audience member, you're always relating to somebody in any particular scene, even if it's the bad guys or something. And you're relating to him, and Vader is in this other weird world, and his helmet is off, and you can see the scar, and you can see all the machinery to a certain extent, and it's feeding you all this information visually about what Vader is, how disconnected he is from humanity at this point, how he is separated from humanity and from what he may have used to have been. And all this whole point of this scene is just to tell you, hey, there's asteroids out there. The Millennium Falcon has disappeared. Well, I don't give a shit about the asteroids. Find them anyway. Yes, sir. That was the only information that had to happen in that scene. But you were fed all this other information just by seeing that moment of his helmet being off, and how far he has fallen from being a human at this point, and what he's become, and how disconnected he is from humanity. And I feel like that kind of imagery is the kind of stuff that sticks with you. So when you get to the prequels and you just see two people sitting on a couch talking to each other, there's nothing visually interesting about it. There's nothing fun about it. There's nothing that's feeding you at a subconscious level. And that's why the original series sticks with people for so long. I'm not saying that there's no imagery in the new prequels, but in general, it doesn't come through the way the original Star Wars prequels did. I think, or the original Star Wars trilogy, excuse me. And I think that has to do with, you built real sets. You had people who, once they got on the sets, they kind of came up with things and said, well, what if we do this? This would be interesting, and this would kind of, this would look cool. And even they not necessarily, they kind of know it at a subconscious level themselves, what they're trying to impart. And they set up all these camera angles and this blocking, and then in editing, something comes forward. It's a very collaborative effort. The prequels, it was like Lucas was from on high, and everybody they were scared, they were worried, they didn't want to talk to the god Lucas, because this is the guy who created Star Wars, right? But at that time, people were happy to tell Lucas, "You're fucking crazy. This is stupid," because they were all there at the beginning. And I mean, that's how you got finally to the carbonite freezing, and they're talking back and forth. They have this whole line set up where she says "I love you" and he's supposed to say something, and maybe I think it was something like "Just remember that because I'll be back." I think that's the line in the novelization, if I remember right. Which is fucking terrible, and they knew it was terrible. They knew it on the set. It was terrible. And finally, Irvin Kershner says, "Harrison, just say whatever the hell comes into your head." And then you've rehearsed it 1,500 times, so he'd heard her line 800 times. And so she says, "I love you." He's like, "Yeah, I know," like because I've heard it 8 million times. And they were all like, "Wait a minute, that's fucking awesome." That's what Han Solo would say. And it became one of the most famous lines in all the movies. And that's what the prequels missed. It was try and I think to a certain extent that's what's missed on these new ones as well. It's very much an assembly line. You have 8 bazillion people working on these things all over the world. You can't, with this kind of money and this kind of schedules and all the people that you got involved, you can't just come up with shit. It's very difficult to try to ad lib and come up with shit. You can do it in comedies to a certain extent because one, they're cheaper, and two, they don't have the special effects. They're kind of designed that way. But in something like the new Star Wars, you don't have that. And I feel sometimes that that's what's coming through in these new movies is that there's a little bit of humanity missing, because when you stick something into a Star Wars, like Empire Strikes Back, like I know, or something like that, that's a human reaction that Harrison Ford was having to a situation that worked perfectly in the moment of the character as well. And how do you do something like that in a manufacturing plant, which is what movies have become now? And that's bothersome. I mean, I don't know how to. That's what bothers me about the new movies. It's not that they're not pretty good, and I do believe there's a lot of heart that's going into them in a lot of ways. Some of it's really really good, but there is something missing. There's a little bit of humanity missing. There was a lot of it missing in the prequels. It's still a little bit missing in these corporatized versions of Star Wars. We'll see what happens to The Last Jedi. I don't know. Everybody's saying, I hope they make something different. I just hope they make something that touches me. I wish that's what I go to the movies for, is to find something that actually touches me somehow. Um, Hopefully in my bathing suit area. No, I'm just kidding. Or am I? Anyway, I want something that gets into me. That's something that touches my heart, touches my emotions, makes me feel like a human. And I sometimes feel like that very few pieces of art do that nowadays. I think television is doing it more, and I think some of these independent things that they're doing on, say, the HBOs or the Showtimes, Cinemax, and Netflix, some of that stuff is even more um, artistic. There's more stuff going on there because, one, they don't have the bigger budget, and two, they have the opportunity to maybe do some things that they just can't do in these big budget movies. I think there are some good small movies that are coming out, but I mean, I miss the days when they, like things like The Thing. I mean, you wouldn't see The Thing nowadays. You wouldn't see somebody taking a chance on something like that, and they came up with some weird shit on the fly. Uh, there was a lot more weird shit happening on the fly back then. That or just plain old cleverness. Just plain old cleverness when you're trying to solve a problem that once you get on the set. I'll give you a prime example. You guys all know the first Superman movie, the Christopher Reeve one. I adore that movie. Absolutely adore it. Uh, Superman 3 and 4, not so much. But the original Superman movie, uh, there's a scene. I mean, this is just abject cleverness, and I see the scene. It took me forever. Well, I never figured out how they did it until I listened to the commentary. Superman and Lois Lane have gone and they've flown around. They said the stupid thing about Can You Read My Mind, and the silly song. It's the one thing I don't like about the movie. Um, he drops her off at her pet house. And then he says, well, goodbye. And he kind of gives her a little salute and he flies off. Camera follows her. There's no cuts. The camera follows her. She says, what a Superman. And she takes a couple of steps. Camera's still following her. She says, Superman. And then she walks into her penthouse. Still no cuts, no edits. Remember, this is 1978. You can't hide this shit. If there's not a cut there, it's because there's not a cut there. There's no computer editing or anything like that. No cuts. Clark Kent is knocking on the door. She opens up. There's Christopher Reeve standing there as Clark Kent. And he says, hey, Lois, we had a date tonight, did we? She's like, oh, yeah, sure. And she walks off. And then he kind of smiles. And he takes off his glasses, at which point, in just taking off his glasses and standing up straight, he goes from being Clark to Superman, which is Christopher Reeve was the only guy that made me believe that Clark and Superman could be two different guys. He was absolutely phenomenal at it. And people don't give him his due on that. But it was the lack of cuts. How did Superman fly away? Because you didn't get in and out of that suit, let alone the flying rig, in a minute and a half or 30 seconds or whatever it took for her to walk the 20 steps over to the front door and to get him into the Clark Kent. Yeah, that didn't happen. So how'd they do it? Well, it turns out, they said all the front projection work that they used to show the flying sequences when they hung him in front of this really brilliant front projector, they found out that this would work well if they filmed him on that step, and used that footage so that when she said goodbye, Superman, she was saying goodbye to a projection of him. And it looks 100% phenomenal. You have to really check it out to realize she's not looking at him. She's looking at a projection that was taped or filmed much earlier. And it's that kind of cleverness that I don't see in movies anymore. That kind of cleverness just doesn't happen anymore. Why? Because if you could put anything you want on the screen, you do. If you have a computer that you just say, fuck it, I'll just build it and do it, you don't have to have any of that cleverness anymore. And so I think the artistry of movies has gone away for computer mishmash garbage. Nobody makes models anymore. Or if they do, they make it to scan into the computer. And I'm not saying that there are talented people working with CGI, and I'm not saying I want to go back to the days when we had no computer work. I mean, certainly the things they did with Jurassic Park and that kind of stuff, I think mixed in, you can make some great movies. But there's some humanity and cleverness being taken out of these big budget movies, and it's sad. It makes me weep for the future of movies and where they're going to go. And when you combine that with they're so expensive, so nobody's making up their own intellectual property. They're making these new things for my kids because, we had what we had in the 70s and 80s. We had the Indiana Jones, the Back to the Futures, the Superman, Christopher Reeve, the Close Encounters, the Jaws, Friday the 13th, The Thing, the Tron. I could go on and on and on, right? We had all these properties. Some of them are good, some maybe haven't hold up, but they were all these new IPs that were coming. What do my kids have? What do my kids have that they're theirs? Nothing. I mean, and that started in the 90s. I mean, look, I did. What did the Power Rangers movie make? $10? It was a shit property that's still going on, and nobody gave a fuck about it. And even that, it's still a remake of something from the 90s that nobody cares about. But there's nothing. What are they going to remake? There's nothing to remake. You're remaking a remake. How many times can you do it? We're in our third iteration of Spider-Man, for Christ's sake. I feel bad for my kids because they don't have those geek properties. They have our geek properties. I mean, if for those of you, and I know Bloodwing, you're at least this old. For those of you who are my age or whatever, you didn't give a shit about your mom talking about Howdy Doody Time or Daniel Boone or some of the other things that they had in the 50s that yeah, Elvis, and I mean, it wasn't like we hated the music or anything, but it just wasn't our thing. It wasn't our generation. It was theirs. And Star Wars and Star Trek and all these others I mentioned were my generation, and I love them, and I will continue to love them. And yes, of course, I love The Wizard of Oz. That was well before my time. There are things that are timeless and classic, but in general, I mean, Ghostbusters, fuck, it was amazing in the 80s. You guys have seen my Ghostbusters film. You know what I think about the new one. If they're not remaking it terribly, they're remaking it to try to shove some social justice thing in it. But either way, none of it's my kids' IPs. None of it is new things that are enrapturing my kids and making it theirs. The closest we have right now, at least for my daughter, is Harry Potter. That's her thing. And even that started in the 20 years ago now. So I'm worried about the creative state of our culture, and that we're just keep milking things of the past, but we're not coming up with enough new stuff. And it's kind of frightening. So anyway, that's my general broadcast right now. I think I've talked my way through it. I just wanted to have some fun. I just wanted to talk about something other than social justice and all the crap that's going on. No more Trump. I just wanted to talk about something fun, something that is near and dear to my heart, and movie making and watching how movies are made and all these movies from my childhood. I think you guys can figure out I've got a lot of passion for it, and it's been a lot of fun. So I really appreciate you guys listening, and I'm gonna sign off for now, but take care. And I'm still working on some other movies. I put channel update. I put something for Danny the Dingo. I'm going to see if something else comes up. But I'm probably going to continue to work on Brazil, and I'm going to try to put in the kind of effort that I've put into some of the other stuff as well. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and thanks for listening.